Good morning, everybody. Today's episode is brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. If you like coffee and you like supporting brands that were founded by veterans and still employ a substantial amount of veterans and continue to give back to veteran organizations and individuals, then I highly recommend Black Rifle Coffee. And if you want to go check out what they have, go to blackriflecoffee.com. And right across the top, you're going to have a coffee club, coffee, apparel, gear, and coffee bundles. Self-explanatory. What I recommend is get a cup of coffee, sit down in front of your computer, look through what they have, and buy a bunch of cool shit. And that's it on the business side of the house. My guest today is Thomas Nybo. He's been on the podcast before. Half of his year, he lives in the mountains of Utah, snowboarding most of the days, homeschooling his kids. Half of the year, he lives his life as a photographer and filmmaker. He spends his time in the latter endeavors in some of the world's most dangerous places: Haiti, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, to name a few. For the past 3 years, the place that he has dedicated most of his time to is the Congo. Last year, he reported on children miners digging for cobalt for our phones, electric cars, and laptops. And he also went deep into the jungle with Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund, tracking endangered gorillas. He is a fascinating individual. He's worked in more than 100 countries telling the stories of people in vulnerable situations. He's worked for the New York Times, PBS, Frontline World, Guardian, the United Nations Children's Fund. He appears regularly on CNN. There's a lot there. He's an amazing individual, and I'm just going to stop talking now and let you enjoy episode number 236 with Thomas Nybo. Enjoy.
Okay, I got the red smoke. Gun run, north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. You're cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
Here we are again. How long ago was it when you were here last?
Exactly a year.
Yeah.
Exactly. Almost within a month, because
let's be careful with the terms that we use. You said exactly.
Okay. Give or take 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. Dude, fill me in on your winter. So we were walking up here. We both have a coffee. Neither of them are from Black Rifle Coffee. That's fine, though. It won't be open until November. We're chatting about the mountain. Broad strokes for me, I got up there less than I wanted to. We also didn't have a great season. The temperatures were, it was just enough, like slop, freeze, and that's just not fun on a snowboard.
If you were anywhere but where I was in the mountains of Utah, I had the best winter ever. It actually started out, we were hanging out, I'm either in the Congo for half the year, and then we're nomads the rest of the year. We were going to hang out in Colorado for a month, and I got an offer to film gold medalists qualifying for the Olympics. So I got 15 days on the mountain in December filming like Red Gerard and Chloe Kim doing the half pipe. And so I got a good start to the season. And then we went and moved to Utah for 5 months. And we're in this place called Wolf Creek near Powder Mountain, which the highest spot we're at is just under 10,000 feet. And yeah, I went 90 times this year. Most days hiking, skinning. Yeah, it was
all on your board, or do you ski as well too?
My parents stuck me on skis. I grew up in Montana when I was 2, and yeah, I might get on skis every other year. Yeah. But I mean, snowboarding's it for me.
The feeling when you hit fresh powder and your board pops and you're floating, which for me is usually followed by the sensation of cartwheeling. Not so people think that I'm like a great snowboarder, because I can eat shit. I have a great tomahawk collection of like helmet-mounted GoPro, just white, blue.
Oh, I know. People, even when I switched over to snowboarding, I never wore a helmet until I started snowboarding. Yeah. You catch an edge and you whack, you're like pre-concussive, and you're like, what? A helmet might not be a bad idea.
So you were just rallying the mountain every day?
Every day. And, it's funny. I bought last fall, impulsively, I was visiting my mom in Helena, and this guy I know, he's like, oh, they're doing a state auction tonight. It's all online, and I got on there and bought a police car.
Okay.
Like a 2016 Dodge Charger, all-wheel drive, 5.7 liter Hemi that goes 150 miles an hour.
I feel like it was probably ridden hard, put away wet, though.
Yeah, it was, but surprisingly, it's only a 2016.
For a cop car, I bet you had it well over 100,000 miles on it.
130, but they're all highway miles.
Sure they are.
Yeah. So anyway, it's like 7 minutes up the canyon from the condo we rent to the snowboarding hill. So yeah, I went a lot.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So I live a little bit south of Kalispell. I recently remedied that. So I have a place in town as well. It'll be a lot closer. Like I can, out the back window, I'm looking at the south face of the Whitefish Mountain Resort, which is fantastic, by the way. I'm sure locals would fucking hate me for saying that, but I will get there. I will get there more. But to be honest, if I have to prioritize things I enjoy doing, I don't enjoy snowboarding on ice.
Not fun.
It's like I'll
fun.
go to class. I'll just go do some jiu-jitsu today, and then a couple times, especially outside of the window of New Year's and Christmas, which is a nightmare up there. Other than that, epic. But I'm kind of picking and choosing.
You need to. You know, I've been doing this guys trip to Utah for 12 years, and we started out hitting like, Park City and Snowbird, and it's like the crowds, and screw that. The place, you know, I shouldn't even, I think I already did mention it. I shouldn't have mentioned where we go. But
you definitely did.
Yeah, I know it. Damn it. But when you find a spot that nobody's at during the week and you can hike and they have all this side country, it's life-changing.
The uphill travel is awesome. They have, and the cool thing about Whitefish, well, there's a couple cool things. One, the technology in split boards, holy shit. It feels like a resort board, so you can lift up, because to get to the slack country, because there's a few lifts that are accessible, and there's literally a rope right at you get off the top, bang a little bit of left, you're staring at a rope, and it says you can go into the rope at your own caution, so you can bomb through some fresh pow, maybe a 5-minute skin. It's actually a really good practice place for transitioning, just breaking stuff out of your backpack, putting the skins on, breaking your board down. But getting to it, you're riding a couple resort rides, but the split boards are so unbelievable. They feel exactly the same.
Oh, I agree. And I know you've had Jeremy Jones up, and I've got a Jones
he was
board,
awesome.
which I love.
Yeah.
I don't know how we haven't gone snowboarding together. We're definitely going next year, either here or down in Utah.
I'm game for both. Why would we limit ourselves like that?
Exactly.
Thomas? Yeah.
Exactly. It was wild. I mean, I was just going like 10 days ago. Like I was hiking.
That's got to be late season, right?
But up high, there was still plenty of snow. I actually ran into a bear down there. It was wild.
Black or brown?
It was a black bear.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay with running into those.
Yeah.
I am not okay with running into grizzlies.
No. We saw each other and both decided we didn't want to have anything to do with the other.
That's the way black bears usually are.
Yeah, so I'm cool with that. Yeah.
Grizzly be like, sweet. I'm a little hungry.
I know it. Especially lately, I'm hearing reports from friends in Montana like, there's now grizzlies in places where there weren't grizzlies.
This may be an urban legend here up in the valley. I heard that there was a man who was riding a downhill mountain bike who came around a corner, and there was a grizzly like in the path, and he basically ran into it, and it essentially swatted his head off.
Wow. This is obviously a different guy, but a similar story. I think he was mountain biking maybe around Bozeman, and you wouldn't believe this stuff if it were like in a movie. And he encountered this grizzly. It attacked him. He survived it, and he was trying to get out of the forest and cross paths with it again. It attacked him again, broke his arm, scalped him, and thankfully for the rest of the world, he stopped before he drove to the hospital and did a debrief on his phone.
I've seen this video.
Yeah, where his scalp's like hanging off.
Yeah, no
and
thanks.
All adrenaline. No.
Yeah.
No.
Hard pass.
Yeah.
You got to do it for the gram, though.
Yeah. Indeed. Speaking of, it's hilarious. I love hearing your fascination with nutty mountain bike crashes.
It's not a fascination. It's a passion.
A passion.
Yeah.
That's a good way to spin it.
Here's the beauty. I no longer have to look for them. They find me now.
I'm sure.
Thousands of people send me, and I what I'm trying to do is curate other people's feeds by only selecting the finest. Like this guy probably lived, maybe. That goes on the story. If it's like a little, and like, nah, it's not nearly bad enough.
Yeah, it's hearing you and like Joe Rogan talk about it and specifics.
Well, do you even have Instagram?
I do. I
Okay.
don't. Yeah, and unfortunately for anyone who doesn't like snowboarding, for the past 5 or 6 months, all my stuff has been snowboarding.
I see your stuff on Facebook. I'm assuming that you probably
I
posted
kind
it.
of cross post whatever, but it's pretty much all been snowboarding since I've been back from the Congo.
It's probably worth explaining how your life is set up. We'll call it atypical in comparison to what most people would do, which would be dropping kids off at school at 8-ish and picking them up whenever, and the life you lead in between then, professionally, personally, whatever it is. You have a different path.
So for the past 20 years, I've spent basically half the year in dangerous or vulnerable positions doing stories on mostly children and families up against difficult odds, whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Haiti, the Congo, doing photography and short films and telling the stories of these people in these situations. And the way that it works out, I don't think you could do it full time. So I do it as a freelancer for different organizations, a lot with UNICEF. And you could burn out. Even with like the military, there's high burnout, and you got to stay on top of it. Like you're just one story after another. Even when this was in November, I covered the 3rd Ebola outbreak in the Congo, right? Over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Everything from, civil strife to natural disasters to, hurricanes. I actually got caught in that big earthquake in Nepal. And these things kind of catch up to you if you don't stay on top of it. And luckily for me, I'm usually working with an organization that's trying to improve the situation so I don't lose my mind. So half the year I'm somewhere else, as we've discussed, over 100 countries, and often for, this past year, 4 months in the Congo. Before that, I did 6 months in the Congo, been to Haiti 50 times after the earthquake, had a apartment and a motorcycle there. And so I'm either all in on this work away from my family, and then when I come back, I try to chill and decompress. Luckily the past couple winters in Utah and homeschool my kids, which means going to the library and getting a ton of books and having interesting conversations, and whatever they want to do, we kind of do, whether it's...
Is there a curriculum that you're supposed to follow homeschooling?
It's funny. I'm on all these Facebook groups and people get like all anxious about it, and I have zero interest in doing that. I'm lucky a good friend of mine homeschooled his daughters, and they're amazing women who had no curriculum. And one of them showed up in Helena, Montana, where I grew up, and went to the local. She's like, I want to try the local high school. They hadn't done any real curriculums, and the school administrators kind of talked down to her. Well, we'll slow you in, in a little remedial. She graduated first in her class, and she was bored out of her mind. So I'm fortunate in the sense that my kids are 7 and 9, and for all practical purposes, they're twins. They get along 95% of the time.
You're lucky. I got 3 kids, and it's the other side of that ratio.
Yeah, that happens. Wait,
it's if they're paired properly, it's amazing.
But you've got teenagers.
Dude, I have 3 teenagers. Birthday season starts for me next Friday.
Wow.
So actually, the birthday season will have started for me by the time this episode comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about to be 14, 17, and 19.
Wow. So
and in any combination not appropriately metered and measured. It's very oil and water. Like 2 of them get together, great. You put the 3rd one in, and like I'm going to lock up the knives.
Yeah.
Like put the fucking chainsaw back down.
Yeah. You come out and your son's got a compound bow.
Thank God he's not strong enough to pull back my bow, because he probably would do. I was like, I didn't have a field point on it. I'm like, you're still going to cork her.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So how do you know? How do they get like a high school diploma? How does that work?
In the back of my mind, they'll probably go to high school whenever we decide to settle down.
What if you didn't, though? Is there a pathway to get that?
Yeah, I'm on some different groups, and you follow kind of a protocol and document whatever their learning has been. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
I feel like there'd be some testing involved too. God forbid you don't do state testing.
I know, but my what I say to people, what about tests? And I'm like, I have the same 2-question oral examination every couple weeks. It's literally the only thing I care about. Number 1, are you happy? Number 2, are you excited about learning? I don't even ask it anymore because I know they're happy and I know they're excited about learning. And we do things like, we were in Atlanta and I wasn't working. I'd just come back from the Congo and there was a SpaceX rocket launch, night launch. I'm like, man, it's like 7 hours away. Let's do it. So we drove down there, watched it in person at night, and my kids like lost their minds and drove
Manned or
back.
unmanned?
Manned. 4 astronauts carried to the International Space Station. And now there are so many tools. There's a great app called Skyview, and you hold it up to the sky and it identifies the constellations. And my daughter's like, "Oh my God, there's the ISS." And there was just this blood moon lunar eclipse. And so we were out sitting in the mountains of Utah watching this and comparing it on the phone. There was like a live feed from California, from the observatory there. And
That's crazy.
yeah, we do these things. We hit Yellowstone a couple days ago. It was snowing. We'll hit Glacier tomorrow. So it's all kind of hands-on. Let's get out there and do interesting stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you watch rockets take off, do you ever quietly inside hope that they blow up?
No, but it's kind of like going to NASCAR, right?
I don't either. I was just curious if you did time.
Actually, the funny thing is when that's one of the things I appreciate about Elon Musk, and he got pushback from his critics early on when the rockets were exploding, unmanned. And he said,
You mean when they were developing rockets?
exactly.
Yeah.
That's his point. It's just like, you don't get it right the first time. And even if we got it right the first time, we'd push it until it exploded, and then we can dial back.
Yeah, you probably should find your limits before anything is actually really
Right.
depending on that. To include human beings on the top. I mean, you're basically riding a Roman candle into space.
And so it's sort of this aversion to failure, right? It's just like, this is how you get good at stuff, right?
I tell you what, Elon Musk and Starlink, I got on the beta program out where I live. It's fantastic. I mean, it couldn't have been an easier setup. The limits of my technical ability, when electronics fail, I go on, off. Then if that doesn't work, I pull the plug out and I wait for 5 seconds. And I don't know where that comes from. Probably just letting all the electricity really settle, to let it settle out, and then I plug it back in. If it doesn't work beyond that, I'm fucked. So if I had to have set up my own router and all that, it would have been a nightmare. It came super awesomely packaged. It did take a while to get here, but I think they probably pre-launched the beta and they had a limited number of satellites. One cable click into the satellite. It came with a kit to drill a hole through my wall, which I almost messed up. Almost. Went through, it goes right into the router, and then the satellite just started moving around, and it locks in, and it looks for its boundaries, and then fastest internet I've ever had at the house, upload and download within 5 minutes.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
I don't know how anyone can compete with that, right?
So it senses snow on the dish. It's not very concave. So it senses snow. It'll heat up and tilt down to drop it off and then come back up.
Wow. Well, I think it was Elon himself when he was talking to Joe Rogan about artificial intelligence. It's just like, it almost seems a little too smart.
Yeah, I worry that we're going to work for the machines for water and food rations.
You're going to love this. Some good friends of ours, we were visiting in Colorado on our way out west, and they have a daughter who's the same age as my son, who's 9, and she's talking to Alexa or whatever, and she's always very polite. And her mom was like, "Why are you so polite?" And she's like, "Come here. I'm so polite to the machines so they know I'm one of the good ones when they take over." And the funny thing is, I'm just like, she gets it more than the rest of us.
I was going to say, it would be just a crushing realization. You'd be like, "Oh, that's ridiculous." And then you go, "Oh, I think you might be right."
I think you're right.
Yeah. It's, I'm not smart enough to forecast the future, and most of my forecasts when it comes to investing in the stock market end up in, you lose money? The red. Yeah. So I've given up on that long ago. Does it make you feel more comfortable homeschooling when you see shit on the news like what just happened in Texas?
Oh my God. I'm of two minds. On the one hand, you feel safe, but on the other hand, you feel horrible for everybody else, right? Of course that's not a threat for us, but it's just got to.
Not in that environment. There's
right.
You still might.
Yeah, it can be. You look at other whatever
grocery stores.
Yeah. So, yeah, in that sense,
I've heard a lot of people talking about it recently, and maybe the two just converged, not having one to do with the other. But yeah, what a nightmare. I just did the Friday episode, which will have already been out before this too, but hundreds of emails, people asking me, well, hey, what should we do? What's the solution? And I have absolutely no answer for them.
There are no easy answers. And this country, I love this country, but we don't like to do the hard thing, right? In so many different ways.
Some people don't like to do the hard thing.
Some people don't like to do the hard thing. But the problem is too, where whatever the challenge is, sometimes we just want the quick solution. But you got to think these things through, right? I mean, so
I was trying to think back. I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine yesterday. I was trying to think back. You know, there were stories from my dad, who was 140 and was born before electricity. But he was talking about, you know, taking a shotgun to school. And he went to school in the same town that I grew up in. Mm-hmm. And they'd go like, whatever the fuck they were hunting, quail or... knowing him, he probably just brought a shotgun to school because he wanted to bring a shotgun. But I've asked him, did it ever cross your mind that somebody would like load that weapon and shoot other students? His answer was, of course, no. So I was trying to think back chronologically, when did that start happening? Because maybe if we could identify a time period, it seemed like a few years ago, there was like that, it was up, like, drastically up, like to the point where people were thinking like, I need to get my kids out of school like right now. But I feel like we need to figure out what changed so we can address that. You know, the most common thing is vilify the gun, which I have a unique relationship with firearms given my old occupation. So to me, it's like a carpenter with a hammer. And for me, I don't understand the headspace. How the fuck do you get to a place where like, I'm going to go to an elementary school and shoot kids? Like, come on. I don't understand that. So I don't know how that happens, but it's more than the gun. It's more than mental health. I don't have any solutions, but I also don't know if as a country we're investing the time and energy to figure out what's going wrong.
That's a good approach. I mean, part of the problem is people have their talking points and they fall in one of two camps, right?
Yeah, I hate that it has to be binary.
Exactly. It's, you know, I mean, I grew up in Montana. You know, most of my friends and myself included have guns in the house, right?
You get a ticket in Montana, I believe, if you don't own a firearm.
I was 10 years old when my grandfather gave me a Ruger 1022. It still has a little plaque in it, right? You grow up hunting,
kind of
shooting.
part of the culture here, for sure.
It's part of the culture. So you can have these conversations. And some of the most sensible people I know are big gun owners. And Utah, of course, is the easiest place for, you know, concealed weapons permits.
Constitutional carry state, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I just wish it wasn't so politically inflamed where we could at least have an honest conversation without people pointing fingers and getting self-righteous. And
because that doesn't fix anything.
It doesn't. You know?
I don't know. I mean, people want to be more restrictive with gun laws. There's already thousands on the books. Mm-hmm. Murder has been illegal for a really long time. It doesn't stop anybody. You know, one of the points I brought up on the Q&A episode that I did, and it's one of the talking points that I don't hear addressed frequently is, you know, gun ownership, take it or leave it, right? That's the beauty of this country. You can agree with it or not agree with it. The safe storage and securing of weapons to me is something that I feel like should absolutely land in the middle, and both sides should go, yes, that makes sense. I don't know if it should be a law, but to me, given the fact that guns are designed to kill, maybe you should have a really safe place to store them that's not accessible to other people. Because I talk to cops in the Valley. I do jiu-jitsu with a lot of them, and I mean, stolen weapons, that's the currency of the day. They'll trade that straight upstream, and you know, people are like, well, how do these guns get to Chicago? Nobody knows who they are. I'm like, well, let me tell you. Hypothetically, there's a petty theft where a weapon is taken, traded for probably meth, given where you and I are seated. That goes back upstream somewhere, and it makes its way there. I mean, have a safe place to store and secure weapons that can't be like a heavy gun safe. Go ahead, meth head. Try to move that thing. Mm-hmm. It's never going to happen. And there are so many instances of shootings that occurred from people who probably wouldn't have been able to get one on their own, but they got it from a family member just because they weren't secured. I feel like that one, it's not going to solve somebody going into a school, but it's like, that's common sense to me.
Yeah, and I think these shootings, unfortunately, tend to kind of blur one into the other. But it wasn't too many shootings ago where it was a father who had a gun and his son used that gun.
It's not uncommon for that to happen.
So you're absolutely right. And I think law enforcement, they're in an interesting position because a lot of them, even outside of the job, are gun owners.
Yeah.
And they also have a vested interest in keeping guns out of the hands of crazy people, and so I'm very interested in hearing what they have to say as far as solutions go. And that's something I would think that we could all agree on, but we can't even come to the table to have that conversation.
It's already started in the national media outlets over Texas. There's shall not be infringed. And, it's like, again, binary. Here's your choices. Let's just treat human beings as if they're idiots and give them two binary choices. We're going to take everything away or we get to have everything. It's like, okay. On to the next. Cobalt.
Wow. So this past year, as I mentioned, I spent 4 months in the Congo, and a year ago, I took a deep dive, like literally into these cobalt mines, primarily in southern Congo, and where to even start.
What does it come out at? Is it a powder? Is it a rock? Is it both?
No, it's actually a byproduct of copper. So you'll get it in ore and remove it from this ore.
Okay.
And it's used in it's a crucial ingredient in lithium ion batteries. And so our smartphones, our electric cars, our laptops, and it's unfortunately for a lot of the problems that it's created with child labor, it's really crucial. It prevents the batteries from catching on fire, and it also makes them twice as efficient. So part of the response that people have had, well, let me lay out the problem. The problem, too, is there are between 20 and 40,000 kids who are working these mines from as young as 3 years old up until their teens. Like, I saw this. I spent 6 weeks in the mines. I went down into the mines and talked with these kids. Some of these kids, too, even though they're mining something where, you think of like a gold rush where they'll make relative big amounts of cash if they find it, they could go days and weeks without making any money. And there were so many kids, I'd say, when's the last time you ate? And they wouldn't know. Yeah. Right? And so it's a very dangerous situation. The threat of cave-ins is constant. And let me draw a distinction. There are industrialized mines, and China owns the cobalt industry in the Congo. And even a lot of the cobalt used in Apple products and Teslas are bought from Chinese companies. Okay. So there's a distinction. And one of my pet peeves is everyone wants to distance themselves from the problem without addressing the problem. I said, well, we're not going to, Elon Musk tried to develop a battery that didn't use cobalt, but he didn't stop using the batteries that use cobalt because they're so much better. And if you stop using cobalt, the battery pack is going to be twice as big. Everyone just wants to distance themselves from it or say, the cobalt that we have is, child labor free. But it's kind of like certifying sausage, right?
I was going to say, what areas of the world does cobalt come from? Is it just the Congo?
Primarily the Congo.
Okay.
They say that half of the world's reserves of cobalt, 3.5 million metric tons, is in the Congo. And any given year, 70% of the cobalt that is mined comes from the Congo. And one of the reasons is it's got a fairly porous, corrupt government where it's not heavily regulated. So it's sort of a free-for-all, although the Chinese have owned it for so long and control it for so long. So, and there are different paths. So there's the industrial mine, there are the industrial mines, and then there are what are called artisanal diggers. And they're just kind of freelancers out there. Sometimes they'll burrow down 100 feet and cross into the industrial mines, but there are no supports. I met so many kids. Anyone who does it for any length of time has horror stories. I lost friends. I lost parents. And so...
Yeah, so like my optic on mining, I guess, would be coal, right? Like huge tunnels and people are just chipping away at stuff and they're pulling it out with the... Is it a similar process?
In a sense, but ironically, the best cobalt, the purest cobalt is really deep. So most of the stuff that these guys are getting, in a worst case scenario, they're getting ore, and you need tons of ore to come out with however much final cobalt. And I watch these guys just working nonstop to fill these trucks with this ore to be carted off. And they get a regular paycheck, but most of the Congo lives on $2 a day. Now, the guys who do really well, there was a fascinating article done, not exactly, but
let's be precise here, Thomas.
A year ago, May, there was a wonderful investigative piece in the New Yorker, and it traced this cobalt explosion back to 2014 in this town where most of the mines are, where I was, Kolwezi, and people were digging for cobalt, and this guy was renting like basically a little shack, and he was digging out in his yard, found some, but everyone is tuned in so they can jump in on it too. So he went in and cut a hole in the floor, and at night would dig down.
So he basically turned his living room into a mine.
And he made the equivalent of like $10,000, which is a fortune.
If you're making $2 a day, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and he was telling, his neighbors are like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm digging a toilet." But weeks into it, they burst in and and ultimately, I mean, these things would go 100 feet down and spread out.
Are we talking hand tools to get this?
Hand tools.
Oh,
so the artisanal miners are all using shovels or picks or whatever. Most of these guys, they don't even have shoes. They don't have any kind of like. I'll send you a video and we can post it. I was down maybe 20 or 30 feet in these mines, and it's hard to breathe. Yeah. And I was a third of the depth that they would go to. I mean, it's easy to pass out. They don't have any kind of respiratory mask. And what happens is, so when I said you might find a 3 or 4 year old working, they're not going to be down the mine, but they'll be hired to wash the minerals on the side of the road, to clean them up, to try to isolate the cobalt. Well, they're exposing themselves to all kinds of heavy metals and toxins, and even to a certain degree, there's even some radioactivity. And there have been studies done that attribute birth defects in the area to, the pregnant women or the children who are exposed to this stuff day in and day out for weeks and months and years. So I feel like I'm just kind of hitting you with a fire hose of information, because it was such an immersive process for me, just learning and kind of getting up to speed. But getting back to this article in the New Yorker, it followed this process. And this town, Kolwezi, I mean, it attracted, over 100,000 people. They say anywhere between 100,000 and 170,000 people are working these mines, and the unofficial, non-industrialized mines. And what they're doing too is the corruption spreads. So, the police want to cut. Sometimes soldiers who don't make much money will lay down their guns at night, and they'll sneak into the mines at night just for a shot at making some money. And it's one of these things. I mean, it kind of sums up my career. It's fascinating and terrifying at the same time. I mean, just from an intellectual perspective, just being there, you're like, wow, I cannot believe this is that was 2021.
Yeah.
And this is happening. And what my final thought was just like, nobody gives a damn about these kids. I mean, because what happens is, okay, let's say you stop using cobalt in your batteries. Well, the families rely, it's almost like farm families. A family, a husband and wife might have more kids. They're like, we can put them in the mines to work. And if there's no cobalt mining, then they'll be crushing gravel. I saw a lot of kids who were crushing gravel. It pays a lot less, but how do you feed these guys? Like, the government doesn't care, right?
Yeah.
The government is often Kinshasa, and we're along the border with Zambia. In fact, it was my first day in the mines, and I was checking my cell phone reception, and I got a ping, and it said, "Welcome to Zambia," right? And I'm like, oh my God. Like, I mean, you're right there.
Welcome indeed.
Yeah. So
I'm shocked they would let you document this. How did you get the access? I mean, somebody somewhere had to have been like, hey, if we let this Thomas guy in here and he takes pictures of 3-year-olds washing heavy metals and people with ancient digging equipment, and we show people how horrendous these conditions are, maybe other people won't like that.
The funny thing is, I stayed away from the industrialized mines. So you can't stop the artisanal mines. I mean, you go there. There was a journalist who visited, and he described it like a bombed out airfield or something. I mean, just the holes everywhere. And so I was, you know how it is if you need a fixer or a translator. So I connect with, anywhere I go, I connect with the local population and as a guide to take me kind of through wherever I am. And this was a rare situation where I actually went there on my own dime with the promise of work. Someone said, an organization said, oh, we want to hire you to do this. And I was so fascinated. I'm like, I got myself there.
Yeah.
I took a dive before I was collecting a paycheck. I'm like, I'm just curious as a human being to experience this without a filter.
What did they want you to document?
Efforts to improve the situation for kids. And there are efforts.
China's definitely known for that.
This isn't China. This isn't China.
I thought you said they were owned by China.
Well, a lot of them. But this is also, a lot of organizations won't be working for the mines, but just building schools and incentivizing parents to get their kids into school so they're not in the mines and exposing themselves, to these dangers day in and day out. But from the beginning, it was such it was like stepping in a time machine. I grew up in Helena, Montana, which back in the late 1800s, there was gold discovered on the Gulch, and they had the highest per capita of millionaires. Like, there was a lot of gold, and it was like, man, it was kind of like traveling back in time, where I would go to these outposts, and there'd be bordellos with underage sex workers, and these roadside bars and shacks, and people just with clothes hanging off their bodies, kids not eating for days, just all trying to get that big hit. Right?
Yeah.
And it's not like there was just one spot. This was replicated over and over again. And so getting back to my earlier point, what frustrated me was seeing companies like Apple, which is sitting on billions of dollars of cash, right? Dedicate, or Elon Musk for that matter. And I'm an Elon Musk fan. I mean, the guy's fascinating, right? But it's just like, do whatever it takes to look out for the kids. Right? Like, put someone on the ground, take a portion of the money that would be in the Twitter buyout if that deal doesn't happen, and work with the government, because you can't outsource this to the government. The government's not going to do it, right? China's not going to do it. The U.S. companies aren't going to do it. They're going to try to run from the problem as quickly as they can, and at the end of the day, then you have 20, 30,000 kids without a means to contribute to their family's livelihood, and maybe there aren't even schools for them to attend if they weren't mining, right? There are no easy solutions. And in the big picture, because these are all, Samsung phones, Apple iPhones, Tesla vehicles, any computer manufacturer, like, there's a lot of money being made on the backs of these kids. There was, I think, Wired magazine called Cobalt the blood diamond of minerals. And I think it's an inappropriate, right, metaphor. And
you hear people talk about electric vehicles. I'll use Tesla broadly, even though I know there are other ones. But they talk about they want to get a Tesla because it's better for the environment, right? They're reducing their footprint. Never mind that it's largely formed out of petroleum products, and the energy that is used to refill the batteries is probably coming from either nuclear or something else.
Right.
But, there's that disconnect on what's the actual cost of what makes this thing run? Is it really better for the environment? Are we really looking at this? Or do you just want to zip around in I drove a Tesla for the first time. I was down in San Diego, and I was walking through the Hertz, and there was a Tesla. I'm like, fuck this. I'm getting that thing. Bizarre experience. Took me a while to get used to it. I totally see the allure to it. I don't know if it would be great for Montana. I think the infrastructure here, and specifically the cold and the impact it would have on the batteries. But why can't we just be honest?
Thank you. And let me be the first
make
one.
the choice that you want to make, but don't sit there and say, I'm doing this because I care. Like, you care about what? The clouds? Because what about the kids?
Right. And yeah, exactly. It sounds great at a cocktail party, but right. And I'll be the first one to. I've got an iPhone in my pocket.
Of course.
Right.
It's 2022.
It's like, come on. Yeah. We all have blood on our hands, and And
How
I don't know what
sweet-
the answer is.
Well, how beautiful is the packaging on an iPhone, right? Like it's actually magnificent the way that they have all that packaging. What if the picture was like a 5-year-old covered in at the cobalt mine? I think I would think that people would make a different choice.
But here's the thing too.
I'm not sure.
I'm a huge Apple guy. Like
I am too.
My dad had like one of the first Macs back in 1984 with
Do
the
you
commercial.
still have it?
Man,
Do you know what that would be worth?
I know it. I actually had like one of the first, I don't know if it was called a PowerBook. I had an Apple laptop that was like just ridiculous. But my point is, I love Apple products, but it's like you have a company that's now the largest company in the world as far as market capitalization goes, and you have people assembling the iPhones in China, wanting to kill themselves, jumping off buildings, and their answer is to put nets around the building, right? So it's like,
It's called outside of the box thinking.
right, literally, yeah.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. So that was largely my cobalt experience. It was fascinating and troubling, and one of those ones where whatever's being done, there are, whatever percentage of those child minors that aren't going to benefit from it. But at least, and that's the saving grace of doing what I do, is I can get behind an organization or an individual who's trying to move the bar in a positive direction. And we discussed this before too. I had to have a kind of a moment asking myself why I do what I do, working in Papua New Guinea, which is horrifically violent, especially against women. And sometimes it doesn't feel good. Sometimes you don't move the bar as much. Sometimes you barely move the bar.
Yeah.
But what are the alternatives? And so when you meet an organization or an individual who's trying that, then I like to get behind them and applaud their work. I'm going to throw a laudit out to someone. I was in Goma, in Eastern Congo, one of my favorite places, but challenging to say the least. And I met this American guy, John Woods, who had a lucrative career. He wasn't a surgeon, but like a medical technician working on doing surgeries in Manhattan, New York, not Manhattan, Montana, for those in Montana. And
The huge difference in population size.
just a little, a little, but quit put his medical career on hold in the U.S. and committed to a 10-year stint in the Congo doing surgeries for people who couldn't get them otherwise. And a lot of, facial deformities where it looks horrendous, but from a medical perspective, it's an easy solution.
Yeah.
Like I spent a lot of time with John. He just did like hundreds of surgeries over the past 4 or 5 weeks. And, for $150, he can take a kid with an orange-sized tumor on his face that he's had and get rid of it and change his life. And I love people like that and stories like that, but not every success story is that simple, right? Like donors can get behind that. Like that's easy. Oh, there's this kid. We just need to be able to, and to his credit, it's not like, oh, I'm the white savior going in there. They actually are training Congolese students, sending them to medical school, sending them to nursing school, so it'll be sustainable after he leaves.
It's an enduring impact.
It's an enduring impact, and it's so beautiful and so rare. And in stark contrast, I mean, the juxtaposition boggles my mind. Then when I look at cobalt and how quickly everyone wants to run away from the problem without having a conversation about it, right? Like let's just be honest about it. Like we all want electric car. Well, not everybody, but
They're interesting. They're not suited well
Exactly.
for Alaska, probably.
Exactly. But thank you for saying that about, just the honesty. And that's one of the things I appreciate about your podcast too, is there's room for nuance and subtlety and to kind of hear one another and listen to the other person and share our perspectives and see where we agree, where we disagree, and where we might, kind of come together with a solution.
Are they looking at solutions for cobalt? I'm assuming emerging technology maybe could change the reliance on it. Maybe the problem with that is if they find something else that becomes the new cobalt, depending on what it is. What are they looking at changing, if anything?
Well, as I mentioned, Elon Musk with a substitute minerals to eliminate cobalt from the battery packs. But if you look at we're still in the infancy of electric cars, and most electric cars are produced in China. And even the ones that aren't produced in China, China's producing the majority of the batteries. So it's like the demand is not going away. I think barring some whatever discovery, this is not going to change. The demand is only going to grow. So there are small victories where good organizations and good people who are committed to improving the lives of, I'm looking at it from a big picture perspective, and I want to though give credit to an organization that might go in and say, you know what, we can't fix everything, but for this group of 50 children, they're not going to be in the mines and they're going to get an education, and that matters for this group of kids. Now, can you take it to scale? Maybe not, but at least it's something. And I don't have the answers. I don't think anybody has the answers. And there are initiatives, but I'm a bit cynical when I see an organization say, well, we've certified this as, child labor free. And it's just like that sausage metaphor pops up. It's like, when I was there, let me just say this.
Yeah.
What was interesting to me and this kind of Wild West aspect, you'd go down the streets in Kolwezi and you'd see these cobalt brokers, and they're just on the side of the road, and you go and you see these kids, 14, 15 riding on motorcycles with these huge bags of cobalt ore. How do you certify where it came from?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's just like, I'm a bit cynical too with, this is not a blood diamond. It's like, really?
And there's problems with all of the certifications. So a real world experience that I had on something far less important than what we're talking about. I sell T-shirts for the podcast, and I'm going to leave the names out of this and talk about it broadly. I met with an individual who said, hey, I want to talk to you about the blanks that you use for your shirts. I'm like, yeah, no problem. He's like, these are American-made blanks, and I can get them for you for, I think it was $2 or $3 less per blank, which for the economics people are like, you charge too much for T-shirts. I'm like, listen, first off, like for me to land a shirt to me ready to sell to people, it's like well over $10. So first off, if you want to go make your own shirts, like bon voyage, go have a good time. The gap in price was enough where in the back of my mind, I'm like, there's something a little bit off with this. And so I asked some buying questions. Like, so where in the U.S. is this made? And he's like, yeah, well, I'll sell them to you. I'm like, I understand what you're saying, but where is it made? He goes, well, the shirt itself is made in China. And I looked at him like, you just told me that this T-shirt was American made.
Right.
His response was, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, so I might get this a little bit wrong, but his response to me was, if it goes through 3 processing steps in the United States, we can legally call it American made. I looked at him, I said, yeah, I understand you could legally call it American made, but it's not made in America. He goes, yeah, but you can put it on the bag and say it's American made. I was like, why don't you fuck off into the sunset? So certified, like child labor free, I get that. And I'm not saying that those things aren't important, but to think that they're above reproach, I would use with caution.
I saw the same thing with some camper trailers, like these cool camper trailers. And it's like, if you actually look up the definition of certain words, there's a clue, it's like 100% assembled in the United States.
Except for the pieces that weren't.
The pieces, it was assembled in the United States, but the pieces come from China.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like, okay.
What was the name of the movie? I think it was The Campaign with Will Ferrell. And God, it was like, I think they were taking a shot at essentially like the Koch brothers. Mm-hmm. And they were going to make a town in China that was like, I mean, I'm fucking this up too, but it was somehow they were going to just play with the wordiology, the nameology.
Yeah.
It was like America, and they were like made, and they were going to put that on the label. He's like, but that's in China. It was like, but it's on the label. It'll say made in America. Yeah, people should. I think those ratings are important, but they're not the end all be all. It was a shocking conversation to have with that person. It kind of opened, and I hadn't thought about it before. I'm like, man, I wonder how much of this is going on out there.
It's got, I mean, and not just with, T-shirts or travel trailers, but organic. Like, what's organic?
Yeah.
Right? Or whatever. So
what did a day look like when you were at the mines? I mean, were you just literally observing? You could film kind of what you want, take pictures of what you want?
yeah, I mean, what I always need to do is connect with someone who's in that world. And it wasn't just the fixer, but there was a group of women in particular who were there every day. So I'm with them. They know everyone, even any soldiers or whatever. And like I say, we're on the periphery of any industrialized mines, so we could pretty much go wherever we wanted. There were a couple times where, they don't want an American to, fall victim to whatever. So if it got hot and they're like, hey, we need to get out of
Maybe
here.
not today.
Right. Because that corridor, I was based originally out of this big town called Lubumbashi, and there was a corridor, like a 5-hour bus ride, and it was notorious for bandits, robbing people, and not just, wealthy Americans, but they would rob the Congolese and even rob them of their underwear. They would literally take everything you have and leave you by the side of the road naked. And they don't want any of that. So we could go wherever we wanted.
What kind of underwear were they wearing?
I don't know.
Because that's a step too far. Leave a dude with his chonies.
Come on. And I'm sure, if there are these aspiring artisanal miners, they're not the finest underwear. It's like not Mark Wahlberg wearing his Calvin Kleins, So
yeah. What do you think the difference would be if you had been able to go to one of the industrial mines?
I think they could have been transparent and honest about what was happening there, and it wouldn't have any relevance to what the story I was trying to tell. I don't doubt that the artisanal mines are controlled and regulated, but that's a small percentage of the landscape.
Yeah.
So to me, I had no real interest. And before I forget, I want to share one of the most profound encounters of my life. I was in the mine and walking out at the end of the day, like we did every day, and there was a fairly well-dressed woman who approached me, very polite, and she said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Okay, sure." And she said, "My 13-year-old daughter was raped in the mine. This man, illiterate, violent, grabbed her, dragged her back to where no one could see or hear them, beat her, raped her, left her bloody and crumpled on the ground." That was 9 months ago. She just had the baby. She's in the hospital. I can't get her out of the hospital until the bill is paid. And I do plenty of things wrong in my life. I listened to her, and the woman I was working with, we agreed. We said, let's go talk to her. Like, how can we help, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how often is that fall in your lap? Not just like on a off-ramp or whatever, but it's like a personal story, something very specific. And we went and we met with her daughter. And I can be as big a knucklehead as anybody. But this is really powerful stuff. And I thought about it as an opportunity and tried to think of it in the mind of this 13-year-old. And as the father of a daughter, I'll try not to cry. I wanted it to be a positive experience for her. So we went, we asked whatever supplies they needed. The rest of the family had disowned them. The rest of the family said, "You have brought shame upon this family."
For the child or for the rape?
For the child.
Okay.
And maybe even the rape.
Yeah.
But to her credit, the mother and her husband said, "No, you have done nothing wrong. We love you. We want you home where you're loved and safe." And so we went, got them whatever they needed, gave them enough money to live for many months. And I met her, and she was under a mosquito net in this rickety little hospital holding her child. And I complimented her on having such a beautiful baby. And if she was ready to go home, and she was ready to go home, the hospital bill was like, I don't know, $50. So we paid the bill. We drove her home and walked up the path to her house. And the mother pulled me aside and said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Thomas." And she said, "We're going to name the child Thomas. Thank you for your kindness." And it just kind of destroyed me, right? Like, it took so little. My point is not, aren't I great? My point is, I thought I did the human thing.
Yeah.
And even when we left, I thought, well, that was a nice gesture. I'm sure that's not going to be the case. And one of the things we did was we said, hey, it's important if you register the birth, this child, in theory, will have access to a passport, to government assistance. The child will exist in a legal sense. Come to this event and register your child. And of course, I was at that event the next morning, and she approached me. She made me write down my name. She said, "What's your name again?" I wrote Thomas. She said, "I need your last name." So there's this little baby, this boy named Thomas Nybo Ndugu or whatever, right? And I mean, it messed with me for about a week, even more.
It's profound, man.
And we went back and visited the mother and the child. And I posted a picture on Facebook, and I was blown away by how she had transitioned and how happy she seemed, considering she's going to be scarred emotionally for the rest of her life by this and really put in a difficult spot. But so proud of that family, and for the mother, the way she approached us. There was so much dignity about her. And that's one of my favorite words when telling the stories of others. I'm a guest, right? I want to hear your story. I want to tell your story with dignity, and for her to be with it and so together and to powerfully share her story, knowing, hey, this is my daughter, this is my grandson, and doing what it took to get her daughter and that grandson back home. It was a life-changing moment, and something I still think about.
Hey, you'll probably think about that for the rest of your life.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And again, my big takeaway was it took so little, right?
Anything become of the rapist?
They're still kind of looking for him, right?
I feel like they might know who it is.
I know it, exactly. And
some people should be choked to death with their own dick.
My God, no joke, because it's going to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, some airways should be blocked.
Yeah,
with portions of their own anatomy. I don't know what that says about me as a person, and that's where my head goes. But I would love to volunteer for that job.
Yeah. Like, can you just tell us a description? We're going to pay a visit to this person.
I mean, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I avoid violence like the plague. I enjoy jiu-jitsu, and yes, it's violent, but I get all of that out on the mats. You touch one of my kids, I'll fucking
game over,
burn you to the ground.
And I think anyone can relate to that, any father.
Yeah.
And especially...
Unfortunately, most fathers aren't as good with guns as I am.
Or have a purple belt in jiu-jitsu and training as a Navy SEAL.
The SEAL part is irrelevant to jiu-jitsu. The purple belt, there's many of us. There's many of us out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, God, that's hard to hear as the father of a dog. Like, those are the scenarios that keep me up at night, that I'm just knowing that I could do something to help, but not being there to do that. Gnarly. That is, I'm going to tell you though, Thomas Nybo with a local name attached to that is really going to fuck some people up. They're not going to be able to pronounce that.
But the funny thing is, my first trip to Africa, I did a 3-country trip back in 2004 to Lesotho, South Africa, and Mozambique. And I showed up in South Africa, and the local office of the organization that I was working with, they approached me, and they were kind of looking at me sort of weird. And I said, "Everything okay?" And they're like, "We expected you to be a little darker." Like it's an African-sounding name, Nybo, or a variation of that.
That's true.
So I thought that was an interesting introduction to Africa. So
Tomas is not, though.
I know it. Well, the funny thing is, I did a lot of work in Uganda as well, and when I showed up, and it's still, I did, I think 5 or 6 trips there. Whenever I would show up, and anyone would introduce me, there would be some snickering, and I'm like, "All right, what's so funny?" Your name, Nybo. It's a variation of the local language, like miss, right? I'm like, oh, ha ha, funny.
Yeah.
But it always provided a laugh. I'm glad to provide a little comic relief. Literally every single time anyone introduces me with my last name.
Breaks the tension a little
Yeah,
bit.
exactly.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll be here all week. Don't forget to tip your barmaid.
So how'd you know you were ready to leave the mines? How do you know when you have enough?
I had a deadline. I was producing a series of short films.
Well, that's a bullshit answer. I thought it would be like, in my heart,
Well, I mean, the funny thing is, because I do this, and this is like, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
Like people do these. Oh, I went and volunteered for a week. It's just like, I need to look out for my mental health because I'm in it for the long haul, right? Like when COVID hit, I was supposed to do a 2-month stretch there, and the guy that hired me is like, if you leave, we're not going to be able to get you back. So why don't you just stay for 6 months? And I was like, okay. I had to kind of moderate, my emotions and kind of pace yourself because you're on your own, right? Like you need to kind of keep it together and be in a position where you can do your job, right? Like there'll be time later to sort it out.
Yeah.
But you need to kind of keep going.
So you had a deadline on this one.
Uh-huh.
Fair. Where'd you go after the Congo? What else have you been up to in the years since we've seen each other?
Well, the funny thing is I stayed in the Congo and did an assignment, a fascinating assignment, one of the best of my career, tracking endangered gorillas with Dian Fossey Group. So they're working to protect a particular type of gorilla that doesn't have protection. So when people think of gorillas in Africa, they think of mountain gorillas in Rwanda. A lot of them, most of them are protected in a national park. And Dian Fossey is working to protect a group of gorillas. They're called Growers gorillas or Eastern lowland gorillas. And a lot of them just kind of live in the jungle and they're up against local populations. And so I was working with them and basically did a short film on how badass their trackers were and what it takes to protect these gorillas. Like, I like to consider myself pretty fit, and they just destroyed me. You're right. They've got like 70-pound packs. They're living for weeks, sometimes months at a time in a muddy jungle with, bugs and rivers. And so I spent, at that portion, I was working there for 2 weeks, but we did like a 5-month trek into the jungle tracking these gorillas. And it was fascinating. And
Are these big gorillas? Little
huge.
Like we're talking like silverbacks?
The alpha male was over 400 pounds. And so there were 2 groups. So when the first part of the mission, these were not habituated to humans. So we stayed a day behind them. We would look for their scat or discarded food or their beds because they try to track them and then they work with the local population. And this was a really cool approach. It's easy to lecture like, oh, this is what you got to do to save the gorillas. But the hard thing is to engage the local community and listen to them. What do you need? Instead of just like, you need to protect these gorillas. Yeah. They said, what do you need? Well, we need better schools for our kids. It'd be great if we had a community health center. You know what? Our men don't have jobs. So they hired dozens of these men as trackers. The women were like, you know what? Our kids don't really get much nutritious food. So let's create a community garden for the mothers and the families, right?
And this is all tied into the Gorilla Project.
Exactly. So they approached the situation from the perspective of the community first, got them all on board. Because if you don't have money and you don't have good food, you might be tempted to go into the jungle and shoot a gorilla to eat it, right?
Can you eat gorilla?
You can eat just about anything. And so
doesn't mean you should.
Doesn't mean you should. So I went in with these guys, and it was amazing to watch them set up camp. So they've got their machetes, you know how quickly things grow in the jungle, so they could whack down some trees and build a table and, bed platforms and night after night do this, and they're tracking these gorillas. And then we went to another area of the country and met with some habituated gorillas, with a different group of trackers. And I mean, I was from me to the wall with like this 400-pound alpha male who's just staring at me. And gorillas, they were chill. It was just like, all right. And you know how this is. It's just like, people are like, oh, weren't you scared? It's like, no matter where I am, I'm with somebody And the idea is don't panic unless they panic. If this guy, my guide, panics, then I'll panic. But if he's cool, then I'm cool. And it was wild just watching these guys. You know, he could walk over and snap my neck like a pencil, right?
How tall was he when he stood up?
I don't know, because I was kind of crouched down photographing him.
Yeah. What would you guess? 5 foot, 6 foot?
Definitely north of 5 foot. And just the way, it's just pure muscle, right? Like,
I've only seen him briefly in the zoo, but they've always struck me as an animal when you make eye contact with them. There's definitely something behind the eyes.
Oh my God. It's scary how similar to us they are.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, depending on what you believe, we may or may not have. Yeah.
I know it. So that was a real highlight. And in spending time, with these trackers, and they're so committed, and even the investment that Dian Fossey Group makes in the community, and even the education of the trackers themselves, and having the trackers go to the local schools where they'll then educate young children so they grow up with an appreciation for what's happening. And it's like, oh, my father or my uncle is a tracker, and this is why it's important for our community. And there are others who care enough to make an investment in us, in our schools, in our health centers, in the community gardens. And so it's really a beautiful thing. And there are about 3,500 of these gorillas, which might sound like a big number, but what was the number? In the 20 years preceding this moment, like 80% of the population was wiped out. Like it was heading in the wrong direction. So
wiped out because people wanted their territory. They didn't want to
people would kill them. They just, for whatever reason, for meat, for whatever, they take over and eliminate their area of the jungle so they could do farming there, whatever, was going in the wrong direction. And now with this group of gorillas, it's going in the right direction. So that was the second part. I actually did 2 separate trips, and then I went back to the Congo for that third Ebola outbreak.
Who is Dian Fossey?
So she is the preeminent gorilla researcher. And
is she the original woman that was out like living with the gorillas?
She was living with the gorillas. Now, it's easy to confuse. So Dian Fossey gorillas, Jane Goodall chimps.
Jane Goodall, that's the name.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Dian Fossey was hardcore. A little too hardcore.
Is she still alive?
She's not. She was murdered, hacked to death by a machete in Rwanda in her cabin.
Oh, fuck.
She was so committed to the gorillas that she rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I don't even know what the official word is, who she pissed off the most.
Yeah.
Right?
Somebody with a machete is the answer.
Somebody with a machete, and this organization continues her good work. And so that's Dian Fossey. Actually, chimps terrify me. Like chimps, I'd rather do. If you hear the stories of the chimps.
I think I heard one time of them ripping somebody's face off.
Yeah, they'll rip off your face, they'll eat your fingers, they'll tear off your balls, they'll rip out your, they're 4 times stronger than us. There'd be a little chimp, he's going to have his way with you. And I think it's kind of like a small dog. Like the gorillas that I was around there, just like, yeah. But the chimps have something to prove. Right? Like there was the woman in California who went to visit her friend. Oh, the chimp is nice. Yeah, it's nice to you because you feed it, and then it attacked the woman.
She had like a house pet chimp?
Yeah, and it ripped off her face. So if you see a domesticated chimp, steer clear of it. I know your jiu-jitsu is not going to carry you you're not going to get that chimp in a rear naked choke.
Maybe I could.
I don't know.
Do I get to start on its back?
Maybe. Then you could.
Yeah.
But
distract him with the banana. And then no, fuck that.
Good luck with that. So anyway, that's Dian Fossey.
Okay.
And that was the second part of my first trip to the Congo.
What information are they able to gather by following a day behind the chimps? Or I'm sorry, not the chimps, the
gorillas. Well, what they try to do is just track them so they know where they are. So do
they make like a circular pattern? Do they have any habits in how they travel?
Yes and no. But sometimes they can diverge from that depending on what food is in bloom, what they're eating, weather patterns. And what they're trying to do is avoid moments where they're most vulnerable. So if they know where they are and then they can go work with the local landowners, they might need to do that, right? If they're spending more time in a new area, they might need to talk with, hey, don't kill these gorillas, or don't chop down this.
Or hey, heads up, there are actually gorillas here. Maybe
right,
you didn't
right.
know. Yeah.
So it's fascinating. This is happening all the time. So they they have to aggressively track these gorillas to not only know where they are, but also if they have efforts where they want to monetize or provide an incentive for landowners or buy more land for them. It's like, oh, they're up against this border. Let's try to buy this land to expand their territory. They can do that. So it's just, it's hard data, and it's invaluable in a situation like this.
Can you guys hear them when you're a day behind out there doing gorilla shit?
No. But when you're with them and you can hear their calls and snapping of tree branches, you're like, oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I was like right by my guide. I'm just watching you, man. Like,
yeah, but let's say the guide started freaking out. What the hell does that solve?
I know it.
Was he armed?
Some of them are armed. Not all of them are. Actually, the ones I was with then were not.
Yeah, so let's say he starts freaking out. You're fucked.
Yeah. It's kind of like the old grizzly joke in Montana. You know, two buddies are going up into grizzly country, and one of them takes off his hiking boots and puts on his running shoes, and this buddy's like, "You idiot! You can't outrun a grizzly." He's like,
"I don't outrun you.
I just need to outrun you, man." I'm sure those trackers are faster than me, right? So. Yeah.
God, you get in nature with animals that are that big, and you realize the inconsequential nature and the fragility of the human body.
Yeah.
Just like, please don't rip my head off, because I'm pretty sure you could at will.
They're going to do whatever they want. Yeah.
And then, why not go from there to, I don't know, the Ebola virus outbreak?
I know, and this one was actually pretty tame. It was a very small outbreak because I've been covering each of the Ebola outbreaks. And
why does it keep outbreaking? I don't know if that's a word.
It's endemic to the Congo. I think the virus is more or less here to stay. And so it will surface from time to time. And part of the challenge is the Eastern Congo, it's lawless. The fighting doesn't stop. There are areas you can't go. And so you can't put a protocol in place to eliminate the Ebola virus, right? So you just can't go there. You're going to get killed, not by the Ebola virus, but by some rebels, right?
If they could put a procedure in place, it could be extinguished there, right?
In theory, but that's the thing about the Congo. It keeps popping out. So it seems like it's truly endemic and existing wherever it exists. And I'm not a scientist. I don't know how it stays relevant for so long and then materializes.
It's hiding out somewhere or doing something somewhere.
Exactly. So they've gotten pretty good at jumping on it once it presents itself. But
and that's the concern, right? That it'll basically hop.
Exactly. And what happens too is it can show up. I was there, and again, it's fascinating and terrifying at the same time. There was a health center in this area, and one of the village chiefs worked at this clinic and was convinced himself that he was immune to the Ebola virus, and he got it and died. And everyone went to visit him, and they were touching him, and then it just spread like wildfire. And the health workers were blamed, and then the health workers were attacked. So you have to deal with some of these kind of local superstitions and customs, and it's unpredictable. And then people flee, and they go back to wherever they originated, and they might bring it to another spot. Yeah.
How did the coronavirus impact the Congo?
The funny thing, I was there when it all went down, and I kept waiting for it to be an issue. I think I was in the single best place in the world. So I was in Eastern Congo, and they shut down the borders. And
because of coronavirus?
Yes.
Okay.
But there was no mask wearing. I mean, there was very little mask wearing. I mean, you get 10, 12 people crammed into public transportation, people on the streets. But it's a very young population. The median age is probably around 14 compared to 30-something here. So they're built to get through it. And the only examples I knew of people getting it during my 6 months there, during that was 2020, were usually outsiders who went somewhere and brought it there, and then they were medevaced out. Like, I was living there with my buddy. We had an apartment. We just kept waiting, and it's not an issue.
Yeah.
It's just not an issue.
Was it talked about there like as if it was an issue?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And actually, because of the protocols in place for dealing with Ebola, a lot of them were the same with the hand washing and whatnot. So people were like, okay, no problem. It's just another thing. And so there was a lot of hand washing, but it's like, had it arrived in a big way, it could have spread very quickly. And that was the big fear. But it didn't happen while I was there. And then when I came back, was there this year, I don't know, it just wasn't as big a thing. I think because of the young population and people didn't freak out about it, there was still a lot of, traveling was a nightmare and getting tests within so many days. And it seemed like there'd be policemen on the streets not wearing a mask, but they would insist that I wear a mask, even
Sounds
though
reasonable.
They were there in the, anyway.
How was it at the cobalt mine? Any talk of
none?
I was going to say
not even a thing. Like nothing.
I feel like coronavirus might be one of the less lethal things occurring at the cobalt mine, as far as a risk perspective.
Right. So I mean, it wasn't even an issue.
When they have, so you're saying collapses there.
Mm-hmm. Constant. I mean, there's a constant fear of collapse because they dig down and they keep going. There are no supports.
Holy shit.
Almost no supports, right? You just go down. And what happens sometimes too is they're not aware of, say you're on the border of an industrial mine. You don't know how deep these things go. And so you go down and you cross, you might be tunneling under an existing mine and that collapses on you. And that fear is constant. And these guys barely have the tools to dig, let alone any kind of support material. And like I said, when I was down 20 or 30 feet, it was very difficult to breathe. Yeah. And you go even deeper. There was an incident too where they were trying to, I don't know whose brilliant idea this was, loosen up like a vein of ore, and someone's like, oh, let's just burn a tire there and it'll melt it, while these guys died of asphyxiation, right?
Yeah, for those of you who've never seen a tire burning, let's say it's not the cleanest.
Right, it's going to eat all of the available oxygen and make the air extremely toxic.
Let's go underground and burn a tire.
Yeah.
Do they even bother digging people out when it does collapse, given their rudimentary tools? Or is it kind of just like, this is where Bob died?
I think the latter, because it's officially not sanctioned. It's not a thing. And that's why I had such free reign to kind of go wherever I wanted, where it's just like, it's just kind of a free-for-all. People are doing their thing, and it's not on anybody's radar, right? I mean, family members might try to dig out family members or not.
Feet underground is...
Forget it.
That's no picnic.
Right. Forget it. So...
I mean, I'm messing around as a kid, right? Like, I'm going to dig to China in the backyard. 3 feet into it, you're fried, blisters on your hands, and you've probably hit some, like, rock sediment or something like... I can't even imagine... going 33 times that far. Yeah.
Day in, day out, not eating for days oftentimes, not having shoes. I kept seeing one guy, he was partially buried and like lost an eye and an arm, and he's still out there. I'm like, why are you doing this? He's like, what else am I going to do?
I was just going to say, he may not have any other way to provide.
This is it. This is the only game in town for me. I'm not educated. Now... yeah, this is the only thing I'm kind of suited for. And he had to work twice as hard. Yeah.
Wow. What are the kind of stories you're looking at in the future? Because I feel like your time back here in the U.S. is coming to an end.
Yeah, I've sent some feelers out there. I could go back to the Congo, and things change so quickly. In fact, where I lived for 6 months and spent most of my time in Eastern Congo, now there's a lot of fighting going on. I mean, the border with Rwanda is very porous, so there are all these rebel attacks, and the government troops are fighting the different rebel groups, and they say it's like a proxy war for Rwanda, and it's a mess. And so sometimes I'll do stories on how local populations are affected by that. But I mean, at this point, I should be a little bit more selective, having 2 children to look after. So I'm not quite sure what the assignment would be if I go there. Ukraine doesn't appear to be going away anytime soon.
It doesn't.
Unfortunately. And, from a safety perspective, if I went there, I would probably be, refugee populations that have fled Ukraine. I did a lot in Europe when the Syrian crisis was happening. People coming across in boats and landing in Greece and then traveling with them up through Europe, Macedonia, Serbia, Croatia. So those are those are interesting stories. I mean, they're heartbreaking, but sort of those journeys. So it's pretty wide open at this point.
What would you want to do if you could pick any particular topic or location?
I find I love the tough countries. Haiti and the Congo are two of my favorite places to work, which might sound insane, but the more time you spend somewhere and you go there and you're informed of what's going wrong, but then you also develop an appreciation for the survivors and the mentality. Like, some of my best friends are Haitian. After the earthquake, a friend of mine in Atlanta, she's a social worker, like, I'm going to go there and I want to help them. I'm like, they could help you. Like, they deal with hurricanes every year, earthquakes, Haiti now. I'd like to go back to Haiti, but it's truly insane. Its president was assassinated in his own bed by like these Colombian assassins, and his security detail, they weren't injured. So, it was kind of an inside job.
It's called cash.
Yeah. And you look, so there's also a kidnapping epidemic going on there. And you wouldn't believe that there needs to be like a Netflix series on this. If you do a search for like Haiti and kidnapping, there was a gang leader who was in prison there who was still running the kidnapping operations. And now I think they've taken him to the United States. And it's like, Haitian narcos, but dealing with kidnapping and extortion.
I was going to say probably kidnapping for ransom.
Yeah, completely. And it used to be like, oh, we'll go after the rich people. But then there are copycat kidnappings. So I probably won't go to Haiti, but I find it fascinating and heartbreaking for my friends who are still in Haiti. It used to be, oh, if I'm not wealthy, I don't have to worry about it. But now they'll kidnap anybody. And if your family doesn't come up with some exorbitant amount of money, they think nothing of killing you. So I don't know. Maybe I need a paradigm shift, Andy, to not always go to these kind of places.
Well, I think the stories that sound appealing to you, if that's what you're passionate about and that's what you feel driven to do, I don't think you can tell that story from Tennessee.
But actually, the work I do in the Congo is pretty safe-ish, right?
Yeah.
And finding inspiring people who are laying it out there, like John Woods with his organization Upright Africa with the surgeries, like anyone can go there for 2 weeks, but to commit to 10 years. And he's got a young daughter, and they're kind of coming and setting up shop there for part of the year. I'm inspired by those stories and like to share those stories, and different organizations that are really working, at least trying to like, oh, we've got these 50 kids that we're giving an education and they're not in the mine. So I do feel that deep connection to the Congo, and I don't feel my work there is finished yet.
Okay, so probably a trip there in the semi-near future for you. Are you guys going to stick around in Utah, or have you looked at moving around a little bit?
I'm there for next winter and the winter after that for sure. I'll keep going there.
What is this bullshit long-term commitment stuff? This isn't how you roll.
I know it, but and I don't work during that time.
Changed, man.
Right?
I don't even know who you are anymore.
I know it.
Last time we sat down, you're like, I don't know.
Yeah. So that's the one constant in my life. We sold our house a year ago in Atlanta, and we have a lot that we're going to build on. But I found if I can delay the building process, my wife seems pretty cool with this nomadic existence. My kids are flourishing. They get to go snowboarding all the time and do cool stuff. So, yeah, I'm going to ride that as long as I can.
You should. Let me tell you about the construction process right now, because I'm in the middle of building a coffee shop with my business partner. There was going to be a fantastic building right next to the coffee shop that was going to have a brand new studio, a warehouse for the fulfillment of the podcast merchandise, an apartment above it. And I've never really been involved in like the architectural design. So I know that it takes time. Like, I've been around it, but never actually the person doing it. And thankfully, when we slapped the table on the design of the coffee shop, that went in for permitting and it went in for bid at the same period of time. So our prices were locked. Mm-hmm. The difference in price between when we locked that in and when we put out to bid the second phase of what was going to be built there, 7 figures more than what we had thought or budgeted for. So actually we scraped the entire idea of doing that. At least here, I can't speak for Utah, but I suspect it's probably the same. the quotes we were getting were truly like the fuck you quote. Like, hey, we've got so much work that if you want to pay this fee, we'll figure it out.
Wow.
But insane. And then the gap between lowest bid and then the next bid is like multiple six figures.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a little bit of gouging going on there. Like it should be relatively competitive. It might be to your benefit, at least economically, to slow roll it.
Yeah.
Because it's insane. We put it out to bid. The email came back in. I was like, yes, we can lock this in. Hit the button on my iPhone. It's powered by Cobalt. And watched it download.
Wow.
Open the thing up. And of course, like there's a whole bunch of paperwork. I'm just like, scroll, looking for the final number. Jaw hit the floor.
Yeah, I think you put in an extra digit in there.
Well, and then, talking with my business partner, the only choice we have is to either play in that ecosystem or not. Mm-hmm. And it's so clear that the construction, not only the material cost, but the labor cost is so inflated that the only choice was like, hey guys, we're going to go pee in somebody else's pool and just wait. So I figured out solutions for everything that I was going to have occur right there, but delayed as long as possible because I don't think it can ascend at that trajectory for much longer.
Tell me about this coffee shop.
Well, it's brown water. All right. It's not cobalt. Probably not much better for you though if you drink too much. So I met Evan Hafer, the founder of Black Rifle. I'm trying to think. I actually don't remember the first time that we met, but we have become very good friends.
You just went skydiving with him.
Skydive San Diego with him and Mike Glover, who's the CEO of Fieldcraft. It's so funny too. People will post sometimes like, "Well, I thought SEALs and Green Berets didn't get along." It's like, as if we sit there, and it's the last thing that ever comes to mind. Like, there's some of my closest friends come from a completely different world than me. Like the inter-service rivalry shit, like that's late '90s. Got to know Evan, and it's been really cool to see him growing his business. He's taken a lot of public flack for things that were the incidents that he took flack for. He was not involved in the incident. It was more his response to the incident. And I sit back, people will come at me because of my association with him. I'm like, listen, you've never been a CEO of a growing organization. You've never been put into a place where you have to make a statement and you're going to alienate 50% of the people either way. Until you walk a day in some of those shoes with the weight that comes with that, the gravitas of being in that particular position, like, don't come at me with that shit, you Instagram warrior. DJS05211 $sign. like fuck. So it was about 2 years ago now, they started kicking around the idea of, they call them outposts, essentially a franchise model. And that was about the same period of time that I met my business partner and the opportunity presented itself. And like, fuck man, we should jump all over this.
Right.
So 3 blocks. So we're, this is 3rd Street, like just north of us. The street we walked up to come up the stairs is 3rd. East, 2.5 blocks west on 3rd, there is a quarter of a city block that my business partner had already purchased. And we just started kicking around ideas and landed on this fantastic indoor-outdoor. It's going to have a huge outdoor area, food trucks. If anybody from the city of Kalispell is listening, we're definitely not going to have a beer and wine truck. Wink, wink. Huge indoor coffee shop, retail. Like we wanted to build a place that we would both want to hang out at or go to a business meeting or go have an out. Like, the deal with summer in Montana, right? It comes on a Thursday.
Yeah.
So maximize the summer months, but also make the area usable, outdoor fire pits in the wintertime. Put together this killer idea of what it was going to look like. It's very different than any of the other outposts they have built right now because we're building it from the ground up. Pulled the trigger on it, and it should be open. I don't know if I've actually talked about the opening date, but it'll be mid-November is what we're looking at. Yeah,
fantastic.
They dropped the foundations in last week. It was really cool to see that because that was a huge step. They said it should be, I think the term they used was dried in the next 30 days. So it'll be a self-contained building, and then it's pretty much game on from there.
Fantastic. Yeah, I just picked up some coffee at Black Rifle Coffee in Salt Lake,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have the headquarters there. They actually have an outpost up in Layton. I was out in Florida doing a jiu-jitsu camp, and leaving the airport, I was with my business, and he's like, "There's a black rifle." I was like, "Holy shit!" And so we went in there, and it was so cool. Like, met the manager. He gave us like the behind-the-scenes tour. We were looking at their like what's been working, what hasn't. It's like fucking awesome.
Wow.
So it's a huge endeavor, but I'm excited about it. It's I have zero experience in that type of business whatsoever. Terrifying and fascinating at the same time, probably equal parts. So can't wait.
You can also pick Evan's brain. I picked up his magazine there, and it's got a full page ad with him, and I love this. It's like, do epic shit.
Yeah.
I like friends who like to do epic shit. You like to do epic shit.
If you don't look at your friends and want to brag about your friends a little bit, you may not have the right friends.
I know it.
You know?
I connected with a great group of people this winter. Once you start, I said we were hiking up, split boarding all the time. And most people,
Do they not have lifts where you snowboard?
They do. But here's the thing, man. I think it's just like the same as I grew up and it was Big Mountain. What do they call it now?
Well, so Big Mountain is still in Bozeman.
No, that's the Bridger.
Bridger Bowl is on the other side of the freeway. So Bridger Bowl is in Bozeman, but Big
Sky. Big Sky is Bozeman.
You're right. Big Sky. Yeah. It's now the Whitefish Mountain Resort.
Okay. It was Big Mountain when I was growing up. But it's like you can take the lift and that's your launching point. And then if you take it from there, on a powder day, I'll just be doing the lifts all day.
Yeah.
But then it's like
pushing people over. Yeah, get out of my way.
Exactly. But then if you've got and where we go, there are only like 6 lifts, but it has the most acreage of anywhere in the country. But some of it you have to take a snowcat to or hike to. And finally just connecting with like-minded maniacs was a good thing.
I think that's the key to backcountry as well. For myself, my snowpack knowledge is very low, so I'm completely reliant on the other people's knowledge there. Like at the what are the guys called? WMR, Whitefish Mountain Resort. Going underneath the rope, it's safe-ish. However, like the very first time that I did it, they were looking for somebody who got killed in a very. What's shocking to me about avalanches is the terrain that they occur in, and it's different than people would think. A lot of people think it's like this very vertical face. It's a shallower angle than I would think. And they suspected this individual was basically at the base of a run, and it started a little bit of and just knocked him over and pinned him face down. I don't think they found him until the thaw, which I think is probably pretty common for an avalanche bearing if you don't, because I don't think he had a beacon on, and he was by himself.
Man. Not good.
Not good, but also, that's probably the risk for some people. They're at a resort. Oh, I rode a ski lift up to get here. Here's the rope right here. I can just go down and bang a left and I'll be skinning up. So, for me, that's my big hesitation. So it's either going with the right crew or I'm not going at all.
I broke down and did the 3-day Avalanche 1 certification this year.
I've heard that's largely designed to scare the shit out of you.
Yeah, I think it's good that I did it later in life.
Yeah.
Because I read of all the story. They're like, the most dangerous person is like a 20-year-old who's taken Avi 1 and thinks he knows how to, cheat death. And it's just
Send it, bro.
Yeah. I'm like, I know how little I know. And the science of snow, and like you say, it's just like, there's like this sweet spot for avalanches. If it's super steep, the snow can't stick. So there's a little avalanche threat. And even we went out of bounds with this friend of mine, and we should know better. And you can kind of see, there's kind of a little slide there, right? Like this can get out of hand very quickly. And I can't think of a worse way to die. Like if you're on a snowboard and you get flipped upside down, and they say it sets like concrete, right? Like if you get swept down and it gets compacted.
I've never heard a good story about an avalanche or being caught in one.
Yeah.
I've seen some gnarly videos of pros who are somehow, they have the airbag packs and all that stuff, and I think that can help you float to the top. But then also like horror stories of up here, backcountry people. I actually I heard the story from a friend of mine, but it was up in Glacier. I guess there are some places where you can go, and he was like halfway down the face and it broke free. And at the bottom of where he was boarding was all a bunch of trees, and you can just imagine. So he got completely wrung through the ringer on the trees. Just no thank you. Hard pass.
Travis Rice, I don't know if you remember, I forget which movie it was.
I've seen a video of him get nuked.
Pushed off a cliff. His board was snapped in 2 places. I think he broke some ribs, and
But he ended up on top, though.
Yeah,
that's what.
that was the
There was a
difference.
helicopter filming him.
Yeah, and he was concussed and looked not good.
Yeah. So what brought you back up to Montana? You were traveling around visiting family?
Yeah, so we finished up the season, and my mother lives in Helena, so I'm visiting her, and I'm going to be actually this is a good segue. I'm going to be the commencement speaker at Big Sky at the high school there.
Okay.
And so I want to get your opinion, the advice that you would give a young 18-year-old Andy Stump. So a week from Saturday, I'm going to go down there, give the commencement address to this high school at Big Sky.
How much time do you have?
I've got until then. So if you've got some ideas.
No, how much time do you have to speak?
Usually, I've done a couple of them, so 10 to 15 minutes. I try to keep it fairly brief.
What would I tell my 18-year-old self? I tell you what, everything that I would have told my 18-year-old self, I'd be like, fuck you and everything.
Yeah.
So it would have been in one ear and out the other. What would I tell my 18-year-old self if I was forced to listen and I had to do what I would say? That's a different, more interesting conversation. How old are you now?
51.
How well do you feel like you know yourself?
Actually, at this point, I feel like I know myself pretty well, but I also feel like my mental age is still 19 in some ways.
You're an adult male. At what age do you feel like you really started to know yourself?
Like 30.
For me, I think it was a touch later. So I'm 44.
Yeah.
I turned 45 this year. I look back at some of the decisions that I made, some of the ways that I treated people, my actions, and it was because I thought I knew myself. I was so sure of myself. And I'd say probably late 30s. It's not that I didn't know who I was. I guess I understand myself better. Maybe what makes me tick a little bit more. And probably I'm able to more describe the things that I need as a person for me to feel like a whole person. Like I've always been active, but it has been in the past few years, probably the last 5, that I truly understood the link for me for mental health and physical activity. I think intuitively I was kind of doing it, but now it's like this is mandatory for me going forward. Challenging myself with things that are unmasterable. Jiu-jitsu is a perfect example of that. Doing hard things, snowboarding, splitboarding, and like learning stuff. Like the things that I do, even the podcast is a learning experience. And a lot of it is me learning about myself through listening to other people talk about their experiences. So I think the number one piece of advice I think I would give myself is be kind.
I love it.
Not even only to other people, though. Be kind to myself. I made a lot of fucking mistakes in my life. And that was just this week. So... if you got to be able to give yourself a little bit of grace too. And I carry a lot of guilt for some of the decisions that I made earlier in my life. I mean, I can think back to conversations that I had with people in high school where I was just a total fucking asshole. And it bugs me to this day. And maybe one day I'll be able to reconnect with that person. And maybe, hopefully, my hope is it's not a blip on that person's radar. It's a blip on mine for sure. But it's, forgiving yourself is a tough one. I almost think sometimes it's easier to forgive other people. So I would say, give yourself time and be as kind as humanly possible. Focus on making people's lives around you better.
I like that. Someone said to me, they're like, you do all this stuff, but it's just like, you're kind of a kind badass, right? And I was like, yeah, it's like people look at kindness as a weakness. But
It's a strength.
It's a strength, right? Like anyone can pound their chest and, act superior, but, It takes so little, like that story of the mother coming out of the mine, right? Like just my 30-year-old self, or maybe even my 40-year-old self it would have been so easy to dismiss her or throw her some money.
Yeah.
But just to be like, you know what? This is a big moment in her life. It wasn't easy for her to approach me. So I love that approach, right?
I don't know. So like I said, though, at the beginning, if I was sitting in the seat listening to myself talk, I'd be like, whatever.
Yeah, come on.
44. Here's exactly what I would have said at 18. I'm never going to live as long as you are anyway. I got this.
Yeah.
Such an idiot. Such an idiot.
And then 2 years later, you're in Tucson.
Oh, God. Here's the power of the podcast. You ready for this? So, and it ties into Black Rifle because I was down every time I'm with Evan and Mike, I try to sit down. It's just because podcasting is awesome. We're just recording the conversations that we were going to have anyway.
Right.
And it can give people some insight. And I'm not saying the way that we think about things is right, but maybe it could give them insight and context into a different way of thinking. If I could move the way that you think about something a little bit on the axis, maybe it would be powerful. Because it's powerful for me when I meet people who shift how I look at something on the axis. So I'm doing the podcast for Black Rifle, the Black Rifle Coffee podcast. And of course, fucking Evan asked me about Tucson. And I tell the whole story again. And maybe 3 weeks ago, I get an email from the officer who arrested me.
Wow, that's hilarious.
And he was like, paraphrasing again. He's like, dude, he did not use that word. That's my word. He's like, dude, I was the arresting officer. And basically what he said was, I'm glad you talked about that incident and what you learned from it and how you tried to help other people. He goes, bro, we have told that story inside of the Tucson PD. He's like, I remember you disappearing over the razor wire, getting onto the roof. And he's just like, trust me. He's like, me and my old partner, who's now up in Alaska, apparently living his best life up there. He's like, we got a good laugh over that throughout the years.
Wow.
So it was so cool to somehow be reconnected. And so I was emailing back and forth, like, dude, what are you up to now? He's retired, and just chatting back. It was awesome.
Wow. Yeah. That's wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at that time, so I'm 20, and I thought I knew it all, and like I know what we'll do. We'll go out and go drinking more, maybe get into another fight, and then we'll just go right back to the base that we told them we were staying at. Because he even said, he's just like, yeah, we just waited there for you. I'm like, son of a bitch. That's not very Jason Bourne of us.
No.
There was no Jason Bourne back then. So yeah, power of the podcast. Yeah, a lot of mistakes. It's easy. Social media does this, I think, to a lot of people. It's all wave tops. You know, it's people. I know some people who look really happy and successful on social media who are miserable. So they show the wave tops to the world and they kind of miss the valleys in between. And just like the swell in the ocean, right? It's like up and down and up and down. And people who tell me that they don't have those in their life, like, so you're a liar.
Yeah.
You're going to lie to my face.
Lies, all lies.
Yeah. It's, plus if you could help somebody not make the mistakes that you did, and quite frankly, I think that most people need to make mistakes on their own to truly learn the lesson, but maybe they can make less of a catastrophic mistake.
Right.
Like my kids, as an example. Like if your kids are younger, mine are older. Let me tell you right now, the problems don't get any easier. Conversations about sex, booze, drugs, cars, and all of them combined. Why not just, let's throw it all in the pot. I look at my kids and I will marvel. I'm like, was I that shitty at hiding things from my parents?
It's funny you mentioned that.
But like clearly they're lying to me on smaller, like little stuff. Like I'll ask my oldest son, hey, are you eating in your room? Like I asked you, he's like, no. I'm like, there's a fucking Chick-fil-A box on your bed. This is Bush. Like if you're going to lie to me, like let's step up your game. But I will not stop them from making a mistake if it's not catastrophic, because I think it's important that they learn. Quote in the Batman movie, why do we fall, Bruce? So we learn to pick ourselves up again. Just because it's a movie about a billionaire who dressed up like a bat doesn't mean that that's not a great quote and you can learn something from that. The parents who don't let their kids fail, I have like severe concerns for those kids.
You'll appreciate this. My mom totally sold me out. I dropped off the kids to hang out with her and I went to pick them up. They're looking at me knowingly. And like, you've got some...
She told them everything, didn't she?
She what she knows, and she only knows a fraction of it.
My dad has done the same thing with my kids, by the way. I was like, son of a bitch.
I know, and I have like no answer. She's like, and they're like, so your parents told you couldn't have a motorcycle. Your friend across the street, his mom told him he couldn't have a motorcycle. So you bought a motorcycle, you parked it between your houses, and you said it was his, and he said it was yours, and your parents didn't find out until... So why did you do that?
And why can't I?
Right, exactly. And that's actually one of the more tame stories. And I'm just like, Mom.
So trust me, my my mom, when she was alive, I'm sure sold me out to my kids. My dad, he probably takes great pleasure because both of my oldest boys were like, I never thought about doing that. I'm like, Dad,
Come on. You're not making it any easier for me here.
Yeah, like you don't need to tell them. And I wasn't a high level. I actually was pretty passive and tame growing up, but yeah, man, it's challenging having. My oldest 19. I remember giving him his first bath with a sponge. And hold him for the first time. I'm like, well, I'm wholly unprepared for everything that's about to happen after this, and it's crazy. It's I don't know if I would have listened. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try, though.
Right.
What were you thinking about talking about?
Oh, for the speech?
Yeah.
I think the one thing, and I used this quote on the podcast a year ago, and it's going to sound maybe kind of trite, but it always sticks with me, and it's from On the Road. And it's like, be in love with your life every minute of it. And what I like about that is it gives you ownership, right? Where if you don't love your life, why not? What can you do to get to that point? And there are ups and downs, but that idea of ownership. And, the first time I've done 2 other commencement speeches, and the first one was like, follow your bliss. But what does that even mean? And so part of it too is owning your life and moving in a way so you're responsible. We're going to have highs and lows, but even, I don't know. It might sound simplistic, but some of the stories too. And I love hearing stories of people's failures. And I was going to talk about my failures, sometimes a spectacular failure. Some of my best moments were quote unquote failures. Like when we were in college, we had this nutty notion, like, let's sell all our stuff and buy a video camera and drive to Mexico in the middle of winter, and you make a kayaking documentary going over 30-foot waterfalls, and it's going to be a huge hit. And we did all of that, and it all happened except for the big, huge hit part. And you know what? I love it anyway. Yeah. Like, I've got so many stories like that, but it's that journey was the point, right?
Yeah.
And you're that much closer. You're like, oh, what went wrong? Well, that's a small part of it. Like, my friends and I, we still talk about that trip or similar trips or similar endeavors, because homeschooling my kids, I think about this a lot as where now it's been 2 years, and a lot of the communities that I connect with, they get hung up on the curriculum and this. I don't worry about any of that. Like, my kids love to read, they're inquisitive, and I look at it as a conversation, right? And I get to spend time with my kids, they get to spend time with me, I get to know them, and I think they develop in a natural way that most kids don't get the opportunity to. And especially the nature of what I do, I'm able to share a lot of stories from crazy places, and they're able to be like, oh, okay, well, it's not like Africa's just a continent, but it's like, oh, you've done 26 countries there, and you've delved into gorillas and cobalt and and all these different things, and we have this conversation. And from a selfish perspective, I love that. That's the best part of homeschooling for me, right?
Yeah.
And getting to know my kids. And I think there's even a similarity hearing you talk about your former career and being away for extended periods of time. I do the same thing. And it's just like, when you come back, it's not enough just to have your ass in the seat. It's easy to be detached, but to actually be engaged, present requires that extra effort. And it's easy just to kind of sit back. And I've been guilty of that and don't want to be that father. Right?
Yeah.
So, that's one of the things I work at and need to work at, and also prepare myself for being away and trying to be away for as short a time as I can. But all we've got, right, is time with our kids, right? And my kids, until they're teenagers, still think I'm cool and like to hang out. And
wait till they're 12.
Oh, I know it. Oh, I know it's
12
coming.
to 14 maximum.
I know it's
Boy
coming.
and a girl?
Yep.
You're screwed.
Yep.
Girl will probably be 14. Boy will probably be 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they'll just like, cool story, Dad. See you later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any stories that you would want to tell in the U.S.? Do you have any interest in doing what you do here stateside? I know you've done it in your career from time to time, but is there anything, any subject or topic that you would actually are interested in digging into here in the U.S.?
I would like to do some deep dives into communities, take the same approach, almost kind of embed yourself into areas where interesting things are happening. I know that's pretty generic, but that would
Any
be
places in particular?
I mean, our home has been nominally Atlanta, and a friend of mine is a homicide detective there, and it's just like Atlanta. What's interesting about Atlanta on the map is it's the intersection of the north, south, east, west railroad. So you get a lot of, human trafficking and trafficking of other things.
Yeah. And
so I think there's an endless list of, subjects that are ripe for exploration. I think a lot of it too is what would be available. I mean, I can have my list of things, but if that's not a reality, I have I do a lot of films, and Francis Ford Coppola was asked, he was like, back in the day when he was still making movies, although he's now trying to make a new movie, but it's just like, what's next? And he's like, it's not my choice. Like I have like 3 or 4 ideas, and for whatever reason, financing, whatever, I need to have these possibilities and spin these plates, and hopefully at the end of the day, one of them is still spinning. So different worlds. One of the best projects I did was in journalism school at Missoula. We had a project every spring where they would pair a writer and a photographer and do a deep dive on one of the reservations. And I was working with this brilliant photographer, John Youngbear, who came from the Northern Cheyenne Reservation east of Billings. And it was like the closest thing to, like a third world country, and just seeing how fucked his people were in this spot that was so isolated geographically, right? And to have that entry point made the difference, right? Where
without that access, you'd never be able to tell that story.
Forget it. And so
I didn't realize how large of an issue women going missing on the reservation.
Oh my God.
Is.
Yeah. It's, in fact, I just watched, what's the name of it? Taylor Sheridan, who did Yellowstone and Salgado, Sicario. He did the movie with Jeremy Renner about a Native American woman who was killed, and they had a statistic at the end, like the government keeps track of all missing people, but not missing women on reservations. Like that's just a weird thing.
Well, I mean, they're supposed to be a sovereign nation, right?
Exactly.
So if they don't share the data, there's no way they could.
Yeah.
The end of that movie was good. Spoiler alert for those of you. I think it was called Wind River.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
At the end, there is revenge.
And what I appreciate actually about it is Jeremy Renner didn't have to kill him.
No, he killed himself.
Yeah, it's just like, go, have at it. You get the same shot that
technically he killed him.
Yeah. Took his shoes and his gloves. And
it was just a slow boil, which I deeply appreciate.
Actually, the line was, so he was sitting with the father of the killed woman, and he's just like, well, how did it end? How did it end for him? And he's like, he simmered.
Yeah. For people like that, and the rapist in the cobalt mine, the slower the better. Mm-hmm. The slower the better.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that means about me as a person, but
speaking of some slow deaths, I appreciated I always appreciate your podcast with Jack Carr. I just started his latest.
He's such
in the blood.
I haven't received it yet. So he sends like, I don't know if he has my shipping address or not. I'll usually get my release copy of his book somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks after it's out, and everybody's like doing these unveilings. I always get one.
Right.
But it's like, hey man, if you want me to like post a picture, which I would love to do because he's a very good friend of mine. I've known him for over 20 years. If you send it to me 8 weeks later, this release post will be 8 weeks late.
Right.
FYI. You probably have a team of people. So
what a transition that guy's made though.
Though, it was a transition that he had thought about for a really long time. And he was able to identify, and I don't know if a lot of people are, and I say that based off of just talking to my own kids, they have not been able to identify to a degree of clarity. Like for me, when I was 11, I knew what I wanted to do. When I struggled was when that occupation ended. I was like, oh, fuck. What do I do now? Jack was SEAL author. He kept both in mind. He's very smart, obviously. So he was able to follow and keep both of those, kind kind of front sight focus for the career and then and beyond. So it wasn't accidental. And he can work his ass off. He's a very intelligent guy. He can work his ass off. And the beauty is he's writing fiction-ish.
Yeah.
It's very, for somebody who comes from that world, you read those books, you're like, huh, okay. Yeah, maybe you can technically put this in the fiction category, but maybe that other shirt is technically made in America.
I can imagine the conversations the two of you would have when it's like, right.
Well, what I appreciate about his books, and I actually have read them all, is the level of specificity he will go into on certain things that might seem obscure to people. But from somebody who lived in that world, you're like, oh, that's awesome that he actually took the time. And it probably, I'm guessing it wave tops a lot of people, but it's cool to, be like, that's awesome that you chose that product and talked about how it interfaced and how it's like, okay, cool.
And I'll juxtapose that with your commentary on like Charlie Sheen as a SEAL with his telemarketer's headset and the
holy cow
MP5 with no magazine and the perfect hair.
I mean, I aspire to have been the SEAL that Charlie Sheen was.
Yeah.
There's been advancements in cinema since that movie was made. Speaking of, Maverick coming out.
Oh my God, right?
The first Top Gun, tough to watch, especially in the modern era. It's basically like a penis with rockets, sticking out the back of it. I'm going to go see the second one. I love aviation.
And you got to see it in the theater. Well, you're a pilot too, right?
Yeah, I'm not current, but I have my pilot's license. Yeah, I think that one is probably best experience on the big screen. I think it comes out tomorrow, actually.
Oh, fantastic.
What's the date today? 26? I don't know. Fuck. What? We don't need to do a Maverick promotion here. I'm sure that Tom has put enough money into the promotion.
But you got to give it credit to the guy. I mean, whatever's going on in his personal life, it's just like they say that the analog approach to this movie, they're saying it's better than the first one.
I know some people who have worked with him as like specialists and advisors when he's training for some of this. Because first off, I deeply appreciate the fact that he does his own stunts. Like the dude does like to ride motorcycles. He does fly fixed wing and rotary wing. Like I got nothing but respect for that. And I've more than one person who has worked with him, and they didn't even publicize like what like the skydiving sequence in one of the Missions Impossible. Like that was months of him training leading up to that. And actually, what I'm thinking about is nothing to do with that, and I'll leave it very bland because I think it's going to be in the next one. They said he was totally present, completely committed to doing whatever he needed to do the training. Was a very kind person. Wasn't pushy with his own personal beliefs because, I mean, fuck, man, I've watched the documentary on Scientology too. I've never been a religious person of any type, so it's like, yeah, that's a little bit weird, but also over here in Catholicism, there's some weird shit too, and why you keep fucking kids, and like, you know what I mean? There's a weird overlay there. Yeah. Not that everybody does that, but it seems like there's really a problem with that. So separating all that stuff out, they said he was fantastic to work with and for. And how can you not have respect for that?
Does Hollywood reach out to you ever as a consultant?
Oh, God,
no?
There are plenty of people. I mean, so San Diego, just south of, actually most movies aren't even made in Hollywood anymore.
Atlanta, they do a lot of them in Atlanta.
And they do a lot up in like Vancouver, wherever they can get the biggest tax breaks. But there are people with exactly my background who did an order of magnitude more than I did all around that area who want to do that stuff. I did technical advising for 2 seasons of the History Channel show 6.
Oh, okay.
My name doesn't appear on it at all, and I'm totally fine because I asked it for it to be that way. And it's interesting, not passionate about it.
I thought I might see you on the upcoming terminal list on Amazon, Jack Carr's.
No, he didn't invite me because he's a piece of shit. But no, I'm not an actor.
Yeah.
I struggle. I mean, I have enough energy to be myself. I couldn't play another character. And he, again, found a bunch of people that are really interested in that world with the same background that he and I both had. So why not just, that's what they want to do. Like drive forward and do great things, man.
Yeah.
His career it's awesome to watch. I think the In the Blood is his 5th book.
Yeah, it is.
I think the Amazon series is going to be, back to the Elon Musk rocket. I think it's on the pad right now. And it comes out July 1st, which is like, I don't know, a month and 6 days, whatever it may be. They're doing the final pre-flight check. Mm-hmm. And I hope, my hope for him would be Chris Pratt picks it up. I'd love to see them do a limited Amazon series on all of those. I suspect it'll do well. Jack was saying it's tested off the charts with demo audiences. So I'm hopeful.
I think we're primed for it. I mean, even if you look at the Jack Reacher response,
yeah,
I think they've greenlit the second season for Jack Reacher. So why not? I think just if Chris Pratt is available and wants to make it happen, it'll happen.
I actually think that's the long pole in the tent.
Yeah,
if he's available and he wants to do it.
Yeah.
So, never met the guy. Jack has nothing but great things to say about him. So I know some people who have hunted with him, and they kind of say the same thing. Awesome dude, down to earth, which quite frankly, rubbing shoulders with some people in that world is anomalous for sure. You can always appreciate it when I hear that.
So what does the future hold for Andy
me?
Stumpf?
I am in a phase of my life where I'm really valuing the power of subtraction. So carving things out of my life, I take great joy in. I'm trying to make my world as small as I can. Like I was telling you, I do jiu-jitsu a block away or up north, like 15 miles away up in Whitefish. I try to train at least 5 days a week for about 2 hours a day. I love it.
That's insane. Wow.
I will go insane if I don't. Again, it's like I'm understanding myself better and what I require, and it's not masterable. It's super challenging. You get humbled. You get your ass whipped, but you're like simulating murder with your friends, which I enjoy. Trying to make everything small. Really focusing on the coffee shop. I think there's going to be a lot of unknowns in that and challenges from a business perspective that I've never encountered. I've never hired a team of people. We hired our manager. She's a fantastic woman who has managerial experience here in the Valley. Love her and her husband to death. I've known them for a couple of years now. But creating that culture, working with her to hire the team. I mean, like I've never dealt with supply chain type stuff. I don't know. I mean, again, so it's challenging and it's risky. We're talking, millions of dollars on the line to even get that thing across the finish line to open up. So focusing on that. I used to do a bunch of public speaking, but at this point, I'm actually saying no to the vast majority of it because I want to be here. There's not a day that goes by when it drives my kids nuts. I'm like, it's so beautiful here. We're so lucky to live here. They're like, well, you shut the fuck up. You say that every day. I'm like, I know, but look out the window. It's amazing. And one day, wherever you may end up, you might miss this. Yeah. So come back. And that's, I'm trying to focus on the things that enrich me as a person and just kind of carve off all the other bullshit that doesn't. Another thing I have come to grips with is I don't do well with a large social circle. I have probably somewhere between 5 to 10 close friends and currently not accepting applications.
Yeah.
And I do better that way. And I probably am more introverted as a person than extroverted. And so it just suits me better and just, focusing on those relationships. A lot of those people I do the same activities with. So it's been nice.
Fantastic.
How about you?
I don't know. Just kind of more of the same. I mean, this year in Utah and having a wife who supports us being there and making sort of that part of my life a priority. And it's so different from the rest of the year. It's been very good for me, physically, mentally. My kids have really responded well to it. I mean, they get to go snowboarding whenever they want, So I don't know, that part of it, and just keep pushing it in ways that kind of resonate with me, if that makes sense. I mean,
It does.
I've been super fortunate that the past 20 years, like not many people get that opportunity to visit these places and to experience this the way that I have. So yeah, I don't know, kind of like you, I appreciate the things that are working and I don't feel driven to explore in, ways that haven't really presented themselves.
How will you know when you're done as far as Congo and traveling to these places that have at least risk associated? Actually,
I told myself I wasn't going to mention this, but the one thing I'd like to do is actually follow in the path of Jack Carr. Like I was trained, my first degree was in creative writing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they always like, oh, I want to read your memoir and all your stories. And it's like, you know what? I'm not interested in revisiting what actually happened. Like a lot of it, they're painful stories and it's kind of in the past. Like but if I could twist it and all of a sudden, there's this warlord who interjects himself in the cobalt mine, whatever, you know? So
Could be cathartic for you to revisit those things too.
it's true. It's true.
But because you're going to have to, especially if you're going to be doing it in a fictional perspective and overlaying it onto somebody else, you're going to have to dive in kind of deep, understand motivations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, me trying to understand motivations of my 20-year-old self, that's actually simple. I was going to say it'd be complex, but I'm just a fucking idiot. So, but yeah, I think there's a lot of growth and empowerment by actually forcing yourself to go back through that.
I think so. And it's easy not to, right?
Yeah.
So,
But never take the easy path.
yeah. So hopefully in a year I'll reach out to you and I'll say, that idea I mentioned? Well, it happened.
I'll write the forward for it.
I love it.
By that, I mean, I'm just going to draw massive penis. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that I can do it on a computer. A typewriter would be tough, but I'll just leave my mark.
Yeah. Also, I thought it was hilarious that you've signed some of Jack's books in airports.
I did it yesterday.
That's amazing.
Do
you sign your name or his name?
His name, but I make it out to me. Literally yesterday, my jiu-jitsu coach, I walk in, there's a copy of In the Blood there. I don't have mine yet, Jack, fuck you. And my coach goes, "Hey man, just the guy I was looking for." I'm like, "Oh fuck, what'd I do now?" He goes, "A guy I kind of know hit up a guy that works for our construction company and asked if you would sign this book." And he's sitting there, he's like, "It didn't make any sense to me because you don't have a book." I'm like, "I know." And then he explained that you sign other people's books, and so here it is. Would you do it? I was like, "Yeah, of course." To Andy, thank you for the inspiration and being the SEAL I wish I could have been, Jack Carr.
The funny thing is that could become like a thing, right?
People are looking for them now. I've only done it like 6 or 7 times.
I think Jack was he was amused, but a little afraid. Like, oh my God, this might go viral.
I can't be responsible for my actions.
Yeah.
So
good stuff.
That'd be awesome, man. If you write a book, I'll have you back on for sure.
Love it.
We've been out for a couple hours. I'm gonna go pick up my kids here pretty quick. What do you want to close with? Where can people find you?
Yeah.
Where can people see your work?
I think the best thing is on Facebook. Even if I post on Instagram, I'll post again on Facebook, and anyone can follow me, Thomas Nybo, Nybo. There's a picture that I'll send you for this podcast of me in the jungle, black and white, smoking a cigar with a hat on. So there are multiple Thomas Nybos from Norway. So that will be the Thomas Nybo from the Andy's Dump podcast. No, I get like that all the people sending me, hey, my name's Thomas Nybo too, and I'm from Norway. Like, great. Like,
cool story, bro.
Yeah. Wonderful to be on. Thank you, Andy.
Dude, thank you for coming back on. It was a pleasure.
And we'll go snowboarding next season.
And the season after that. But we're not limited to Montana and Utah. We'll do both and then maybe find neutral ground in between.
All right. Silverton, Colorado. I'll tell you more about it another time.
Perfect.
All right.